Yeah, not only are family courts not matriarchal, but pointing to the bias in family court decisions is another example of men telling on themselves.
When it comes to child custody, men's rights activists like to make a lot of big claims about the American legal system. But are they true?
So the other argument that gets used is around custody, pointing to the statistic that women get custody 65% of the time. But what's ignored is that 50% of that is because both parents agree the mother should have custody. 40% of the 50 states have a default custody schedule of 50-50, with, unsurprisingly, Republican states dragging their feet when it comes to giving dads more time. But let's take a look at one of the states where 50-50 isn't the default, such as my home state of Texas, where men get awarded 33% of the custody. So the default order in Texas is every other weekend, which if you're doing the math equates to about 14% of the time. But the average is higher at 33%. And that's because this is merely a default. You can request a different schedule, you just have to ask for it. And it looks like in Texas, about half the time men are indeed asking for 50-50 schedules. But half the time, they're totally fine with every other weekend. And we know that's the case because in 90% of cases, they're settled without a judge intervening. Both parents agree on the custody schedule. So this isn't men not getting awarded what they're asking for. This is men straight up being okay with taking less custody of their kids.
So this TikTok by ex-patriarch highlights the simple fact that the reason why custody hearings seem to be so biased in the American judicial system, plain and simple, is because most men in cishet relationships, when those relationships break up and there is a custody hearing, it turns out are perfectly fine with the mothers taking the overwhelming majority of the time. If you actually look at the data, what many on the right try to claim is some sort of widespread discrimination against men is actually men deciding for themselves that they're perfectly fine just accepting their kids once every other weekend. It's not the result of some sort of systemic bias against men, and it's definitely not because we live in a deeply misandrist society that's so matriarchal. No, fundamentally, it's just because a lot of men aren't as interested in doing the parenting work that they expect women around them to do, which might play a role in why they got divorced in the first place. And that's something that we really need to highlight and understand, because even though a lot of the people on the right like to claim about the importance of fatherhood and all of these things, the ultimate reality is that these very same people are also very unlikely to accept the caring labor that is a part of managing a household. And that is shown in countless studies where even where both parents are working full-time, the mother is way more likely to be expected to do a larger share of like the home care work, things like doing dishes, laundry, cleaning the house, etc. And also expected to do the bulk of the parenting work, things like driving kids to school, driving kids to soccer practice, those types of things disproportionately get placed as the responsibility of women, and even men who are in presumably equal relationships end up not doing as much. And so this is another perfect example of how our society is actually deeply misogynistic and how our society is biased against women. It's not that we are giving women the privilege of having the children in these court hearings and decisions. It's that men are expecting women to do all the labor of raising their children. So next time you hear one of these men's rights activists try and claim that custody hearings are biased against men, just point at the data and realize the fact that most men who are actually in custody proceedings are more than willing to accept the terms where they get much less time and thus less responsibility to take care of their children. Now, this doesn't mean that there aren't exceptions to this, but the data doesn't lie. And what is presented by the people on the right as some sort of extreme inequality is in fact the personal decisions that countless men across the country are making for themselves.